Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us on the 11th episode of Coffee Table Conversations. We hold this episode in a time when China is behaving notorious and we need to closely watch the development at our borders. Our heart and prayers with the family of 20 soldiers who died in action. They did what our political establishments can't do and will never do, is protect the people of India. Our border situation will always be precarious and hence we need to be prepared for eventualities. As much I would love to discuss in detail China, maybe that for another day. It's the 80th day of the lockdown and we are opening up with spikes in the number of cases and the green shoots that we were expecting is missing. While each state government is grappling with how to get this menace under control, it requires people as a whole to adhere to the norms, the guidelines suggested by government, ICMR and WHO. While this is missing, we all need to agree that there's an issue with our last mile connectivity, which is poor, and we could not cater a lot of India, and the supply chain had initially come to really a standstill during the initial part of lockdown. While we have excess of food and essential commodities, we could not reach many, and what happened next is a story which we all are aware of. This clearly indicates that we still have to make our logistics industry stronger. And in the current scenario where India is facing a war-like situation, it would be of foremost importance for us to develop a strong logistics network that would ensure the supply chain does not get impacted. One person who ensured that the supply chain was up and running and delivering essentials across Andaman during the lockdown so that no one goes hungry is Dr. Sabia Mullah. Sabia is a first-gen entrepreneur who decided to challenge the status quo of the logistics industry, which is primarily male-dominated. Sabia, a native of Mumbai, has a degree from Mumbai University and a PhD in trade and transport. She moved to Andaman and Nicobar about 12 years back, where she started her first business of DMC Andaman Tours and Travel Agency, which is accredited by the Andaman Chamber of Commerce. Once the entrepreneurial bug had bitten, she started her logistics company called App Logistics Private Limited. What started with 2 employees has now more than 60 employees that ensure goods are delivered to Andamanis. App Logistics provides a single window advantage to Amazon. However, it comes with its own set of tech challenges, from poor technology to bad internet, from lack of manpower to poor travel infrastructure in Andaman. However, she has managed to crack the code and has been delivering more than 1,500 deliveries per day. She's been she has been conferred with the Woman Entrepreneur of 2018 by the Andaman Nicobar Cooperative Society. With all these achievements in her kitty, it would be unfair if I do not stress that she's married and has a child, and like any one of us, has her share of work-life balance challenges. Thank you, Sabia, for joining us this evening. My first question, how was it everything back there?
Hi Neil, good evening, and first of all, thank you for having me over for this coffee table conversation. Really, to be honest, nobody reaches this far in this part of India to look and see how people are working and how the people are surviving. So I think you have crossed miles to reach out to people here. So first of all, thank you for that. And yes, as the rest of India is dealing with the lockdown, so is Andaman. We did had a few cases initially. We became a green zone, and now we again have a few cases. So things have been going up and down. But yes, interestingly, Andaman is connected to the rest of India only through airlines. And when these airlines were stopped, we were literally cut off from the entire world. So that itself speaks volumes of how it was to be here during the lockdown. There was absolutely no other connectivity to these islands.
So I think let's start something. Let's give people a background of how everything started. You started your career as an executive and with Axis Bank, and within few months you said, you know what, you want to do something different in life, and you did an entrepreneur journey, which was your first travel company. So how did that bug happen? How did this whole challenge different happen?
Yeah. So interestingly, I am the first entrepreneur of my family, and then to add on a lady entrepreneur, because somehow we like to add up that gender difference more interestingly. So yes, I am the first lady entrepreneur of my family. And my first job was with a private bank. I took a sabbatical it was not for any other reasons. It was because for my health reasons. And when I decided to join back again, I was very keen that I want to do something as an entrepreneur, not go back to the join back as any other company, you know. So there were many ideas. I wanted to put a lot of things, a lot of my own thoughts into my work, which I thought is possible only when I'm an entrepreneur. And I started off also, and I didn't have any money when I started my work as a travel agent. That was one job I knew that didn't require much of investment. Andaman being islands, and tourism is the only proper industry we can say here. So I started off as a travel agent, started working from home, started earning money, and then I went on to grow my business. And I was adding a lot of personal touch to the holiday packages I was making for my clients, which then spread the word of mouth that okay, fine, you know, I'm doing well, I'm able to provide them some different kind of experience. So initially it was B2C, and then it went to B2B, and that's how it started spreading. And within a few years I realized that I wanted to diversify. I wanted to diversify in the service industry, but not something in the tourism sector, something different. So while I was doing my PhD, being the travel agent, that's when I realized that there is a gap somewhere which can be filled up nicely if it's given a different kind of approach in the logistics sectors in this island. Because understanding how far located it is, logistics is literally the backbone, the lifeline for these islands, you know. Though it is for any industry, logistics is the backbone. But especially in Andaman, there was an absolute lack of many things, you know, such as easy availability of goods, essentials, and necessities, an easy flow, and that sector could be developed. And that's how I decided to enter the logistics part as an entrepreneur.
Interesting. So, 12 years from being a travel person to logistics, that takes one different, that's like two different tangents. But
No, I have not been a travel agent for 12 years. I was a travel agent for 5-6 years, and then moved to logistics for 5 years. That way.
so the next thing is this whole lockdown was a surprise. I think nobody had an idea this is going to come. And as usual, I think 8 p.m. is a very auspicious time to suddenly say this is going to change forever. And then late in the night, you are grappling with how things will happen. And as you said, that Andaman completely depends on, you know, supplies from the mainland. So India has to send across stuff to Andaman so that things run. So what happened there, how things were, and then what did you do to make an impact? I mean, what were the challenges, what was given to you? So I remember that discussion that we had was a challenge that the government told you that, can you do this? And then you said, yes, I'll set it up. Within a short span, you were up and running, supplying stuff. So that journey, if you could share with us.
Yeah, surely. So as we all know, when we started getting the news of these COVID patients increasing day by day, the number of infected people going up. So the administration decided that one of the ways to stop it is to stop the incoming flights, because it is mostly the outsiders who were getting it. Now, one of the major reasons to stop is also because we don't have a good medical infrastructure. We just have one government hospital and the number of beds are 50. So the whole question is that what if the situation gets out of hand? So they decided to stop the flights coming in. Now, when they say flights don't come in, obviously supplies also don't come in, but we do have the sea route, which bring in the supplies to Andaman. Like they bring the main chunk of essentials to Andaman. And there was a strong lockdown here, especially because the administration wanted to control the spread even before it could go out of hand. You know, like they want to take all precautions. So they came up with like nobody moves out. Even for essentials, there was a point where we were not allowed to move out. And the whole point was everything will be delivered to you. But how? This answer was not available with anyone. They asked the people that you will get essentials at your place. How? we very well knew that this place did not have the logistic framework to go and deliver things which were coming through online orders. So how is it possible that to 45,000 households you are going to cater through which kind of groundwork do you have to cater to those 45,000 households? You know, so somewhere it was sticking inside me that maybe we had ideas, maybe we had the infrastructure where we could help the administration. So through the Chamber of Commerce, we met up with the administrative wing, and they did approach us that if we could help them at least to cater to the quarantined homes, because by then the essential stores were opened up so that people could go and buy something, but the quarantined people were not allowed to step out. So we helped them to organize and get the groundwork ready to cater to these quarantine homes so that they could stay indoors and control the infection in a way.
So basically, you instrumentally created a whole place where you created like an order system where you knew things have to be delivered at so and so place, and then you used to pick it up from the government. It was government controlled, or it was all essentials were provided by someone else?
No, so we set up a group of people and trained them how they could go and deliver to the quarantine homes, taking in care the COVID protocols which need to be followed while delivering to quarantine homes or to these people, and especially where money was concerned, how to sanitize, how to wear the gloves, masks, especially maintaining the social distance. So those kind of things, what people were trained for that. And there were stores, we had identified 2-3 stores so that, you know, it is not too much of an inconvenience and too much of a confusion what can be procured from where. So we met up with these bakery people and with the grocery people, the medicine stores, the vegetables, the fruits, and we would take in the orders. We were working in the administrative building with the administrative people, and they would forward us the demands. We would speak to the people, try to understand what they need, including mineral water and sometimes gas connections, and try to supply to them.
So basically, you became the last mile connectivity for so many people who could not move around and shouldn't move around. That was the idea. But do you think this could have been replicated across India, this whole model? Or do you think we missed it as we really missed this whole advantage of building a network like this? Because a lot of stories across India where people were not getting food, we could not deliver to them, we couldn't identify. So you have a logistics system in the rest of India, and we could not do it here.
Assume that I tell you, let's say on one-to-one person, I tell you that you have. So what is your first reaction? Oh, but I need my essentials. And along with essentials, there are going to be need of many other necessities. How about like my system is not working, I have to work from home. My child has to take e-lessons. So isn't that a part of an essential if you're asking me to stay home? And for how long are we going to stay home? It was not defined. So similarly, even in Andamans, if they could have an entire meet of all the people involved in a last mile delivery system, it could be from any company. And since work was not there, if we could pool in the resources, we could have dealt with it much better, give people a much better experience, convince them that yes, stay at home can be a good experience. It does not need to feel like, oh, you are locked up. So if there's a seamless supply, if there's a seamless delivery of whatever people need, whenever people need, you can definitely convince them to stay home. Similarly, now coming to Pan India, this is a similar situation. We have a good logistics network. We have n number of good companies working in this sector. If people were pulled in together, asked for if we could take their advice, their suggestions, because see, these are the people who are setting up, who are giving people a seamless experience under normal circumstances. So I'm sure they are quite capable of designing something that can be reached out to people during such a pandemic, and their experience can be enhanced. then we wouldn't need people to go to the stores, and we wouldn't have people spreading the infection. This could have been done in a more organized way, definitely.
So one of the key takeaways is to have consultation rather than being abrupt. Consult people before you take a very abrupt decision. You just never know, an idea will come from anywhere, which may be more, better to implement.
See, absolutely, Neil. Let's assume that we are the private sector and we are only concerned about our benefit.
Hello?
Hello. Are you
Yeah.
able to hear me, Neil?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. There's something wrong with my headset.
No.
So, as I was saying, that definitely we could have pooled as whatever resources we had and given everyone a better experience. Like even the private sector can come forward, given their ideas. This is a situation where you need to be more compassionate, more empathetic towards the problem rather than, okay, I'm the private sector and I'm the government sector. Here we have to be together in this whole situation.
Okay, I agree. We all faced a lot of challenges. Initial days, so I agree. We really faced a lot of challenges. Okay. So one of the challenges is you have more than 60 employees who are working with you during this whole pandemic. And I'm sure anybody must have got really scared on how to go out and will I get infected and why should I come and work? So life comes prior to everything. So how did you manage your employees? What were the new processes that had to be set in to ensure, to build trust between them, that things are okay, there's no problem, you can, you'll not be infected, don't worry?
So I'll just repeat because I can hear you very softly. And as I said, my headset is giving some problems. So I'll just repeat the question. You've asked me how I train my employees.
So my question is, how did the trust building happen during the session, during the whole COVID? How did you manage to build trust?
Of the people who are working with me.
Correct. So they must have got scared of the whole COVID thing.
Yeah. So we were a team of few people and we trained them. We had someone from the general hospital here join us, a doctor, and we trained people. We explained to them what precautions they can take, starting with the social distancing, with the face mask, the gloves, the sanitization, repeated sanitization, washing hands, and sanitization of the money. So we explained to them that if these steps are followed, you need not be worried. So we trained people completely who were new, who were not from this industry for this work. And they were very cooperative. Like they believed it, they were practicing it, they saw it. So to win their trust, we made it a seamless experience for them because we gave them permits to move around and we explained that these people are not infected. They are not in isolation. They are just quarantined for safety reasons. So whichever homes they were delivering to were not infected homes. They were just the quarantined homes for the safety reasons.
Okay. What I'm asking is, so you also were on the road. You were also carrying, the essentials to be delivered across, and it must be a lonely, empty road all the while when you're traveling. So what all experiences you had during that whole nearly 70, 80 days before you started opening up?
Yeah. So what was the most beautiful part was that we could see all the animals enjoying the road. Like I could see the birds all the while on the streets and dogs moving around. But one sad part was that these animals, like the dogs and the cats and various other animals, they were really not getting the food because of this lockdown. So most of them who are associated with the restaurants or with certain kind of household waste, they couldn't get their food. That was one part of it. The roads were much empty and cleaner. There was no traffic, so we could move around. And as for the experience of going and delivering it to people, I think nothing like that. The satisfaction it was giving, because I would get calls that people would say, there's no milk at my place for my child. I have a 4-month-old baby at my place. Then there was a cop. There was this incident I remember when I was passing by for the delivery work, and there was this cop who stopped me, and he's like, "What are you doing? You know, like where are you going? It's a lockdown. You can't move around." So I was like, "I'm delivering essentials." He's like, "Okay." He asked me for details. He asked me for my permits, and then he said, "Could you possibly provide me with diapers and some baby powder or something? Because when I finish my duty, I have to rush back home, and by then the stores are closed." So there were people from all walks of life who were impacted by this. The stores were open for a very small time. They could not access the stores. They were doing their duties. The frontline heroes were doing their duties. Somebody had to deal with their problems also. So the problems were at various levels with various people, and there was no one to solve it, you know. I understand with the administration and the government, because they had to deal with the entire population. So to go to micro levels and understand the problems and to deal with it is not possible by the administration or by the government. So those were the kind of things that we were dealing with.
Interesting. But that's an interesting episode, you know, the frontline police officer asking you, saying, "Can you please deliver this at my place?" Sorry. I mean, I can just understand how many of them must have gone through a lot of pain, for that matter.
There were so many. Neil, the most interesting part was the administrative building through which I was operating. That building itself had the demand for so many things. Those people were working seamlessly from 7 in the morning till 7 in the evening. So they also have a family. They also have necessity requirements. Who fulfills that? They are fulfilling the problems. They are fulfilling the needs of these quarantine homes and the other general public. But there was no one to solve their problems.
Interesting. But there are a lot of women who have tuned in for this session, in this participant, and they all, and including me, I had this thing. So you're a mother of a child. You're married. You have commitments at home, and you are working on the lockdown, delivering essentials. How did you manage? I mean, how do you manage either ways being an entrepreneur? But what were more challenging during the lockdown situation? Like, so how did this whole woman? I mean, being a woman, being a mother is such a challenging thing. How did you manage to cope up with all this?
Okay, Neil, honestly, how many times have you asked that question to a man?
Yeah, that's right.
I am totally surprised why people come up with this kind of a question. But honestly, I don't know why men are not asked that. So it simply means that men do not contribute to any household work. Okay, I'm drawing that conclusion, Neil. Fine. Now coming back to how I manage it in a day-to-day life. You just learn to tune in and make it your routine. Once you've decided that you have to be there, out, working, doing something for the industry, for the economy, for yourself, and for your child to look up to, you automatically see things falling into place. So it's just the determination, the grit, the perseverance that keeps you going. And that's exactly what I did even during lockdown. So it was for me just to follow my routine that I was doing before lockdown. Yes, I did miss out on my needs big time, but then it was just like managing with a little extra time. Waking up a little half an hour early, going to sleep a little half an hour late. But what has to be done has to be done. Everybody was making their bit of sacrifices. I did mine, and I was there on ground zero.
Interesting. But as an entrepreneur, you felt it challenging, or because logistics is pretty much a man-woman dominated space, and you may be one of the few women who are there in that segment. So, you think it was an initial challenge you had, or it was everyone helped you to reach where you are?
Truly speaking, Neil, every single male person associated with my job that I have met all in this 5-year journey has been so encouraging. I have never felt that it is any kind of male dominated or XYZ dominated or anything like that. I was doing my job. I've been appreciated at every step, every milestone, and I have learned so many things. and I don't think there is any kind of discrimination, at least in the logistics world, for women. It is wonderful, it is great, and I think that women can do much better because we add that personal touch to it. So we add a personal touch to the experience which we have to pass on to the customer, which makes the customer experience all the more better. And I think it's preconceived notions and ideas which even women have before they enter into any kind of work and job, that, oh, this is a male dominated society, I may not be accepted. On the contrary, because you're a woman, there is a lot more respect that you're crossing the boundaries and you're coming into a different kind of sector, working, giving your best and making a good experience.
Interesting. So one of your biggest client is Amazon, and so how does it work with Amazon? How do you manage your? How is the whole arrangement with Amazon? If you are okay to speak with.
I'll just skip that question, Neil. I'll speak more about what is Andamans, how we can do things better here, what you want to know more about, how I'm doing as a woman entrepreneur in general about logistics, generally about logistics, that
So
how it is so essential to the economy, and it still needs, there's still so much of scope for logistics to grow. It can create so many jobs opportunities in our country, and how it can progress, how it can position India globally.
Correct. So what do you think should be done critically to improve the logistics space? I think there's still a lot to be done. And when we say logistics, it may be shipping, it may be road, rail, it may be multimodal. So what do you think is missing, and what do you think should be done more?
So the government has come up with the Indian logistics policy, I think, and I don't know if it has been tabled completely now. There are a lot of plans that the government has done to improvise the logistics in our country, and as you said, there is a lot of scope of multimodal logistics plan. One thing that we can really explore as a country is the seaways, the sea route, because the coastline that we have, the inland waterways that we have, and knowing that shipping is one of the cheapest way, we can considerably bring down the cost of logistics, and its contribution towards GDP can improvise greatly. But again, we need to have more quicker and easier clearances. Right now, a lot of decisions is taken because there are a lot of different ministries taking decisions for the logistics in our country. Like we have the aviation ministry, we have the shipping ministry, and everything differently. Maybe we could all consolidate it into one single place and have a better platform to have quick clearances.
So there was one question. One of the participant is on these, services like Porter and etc. that we have. So these are aggregator models, I think. So the Porter on the app, and you get it. So how do you think they can manage their supply and demand requirements?
So I understand that this Porter is something where they people hire vans for the delivery of their products. So I guess there is sufficient demand in the market right now, because things have started to open up, and one thing that can be of concern is how the migrants have moved back. So I guess a lot of these companies have been impacted, for they must be having their drivers, their staff who might have been the migrant workers, So migrant workers does not necessarily mean they're a labor. There are a lot of people who move to other cities for job opportunities. So maybe that movement of the migrant workers has impacted these companies, and demand is definitely there. I am not sure how they are providing the supply for it.
So you had the same problem of reverse migration in Andaman also, where a lot of workers left the island and went back to from where they belong to. So I understand Andaman has a lot of Bihari, Orissa, Bengali people who come there as workers and then they go back. Is what I understand.
So for the migrant workers part, we had laborers, and we had a lot of people who were working in the hotel industry, the tourism industry. Now, both the parts, because the construction work had stopped, a lot of companies who had bought in these laborers from the different states, they have sent back their laborers because work is not like before. That is one thing. Also, the laborers also wanted to get back to their homes, looking at this situation, and I think there was too much of panic across the whole of India, which again could have been handled in a more efficient manner. But here the administration did take care of the laborers, the migrant workers, quite well. And for the others who were associated with the tourism industry, it is going to be a long time before the tourism industry in Andaman comes back to life. And that is one of the reasons why the hotel owners, the dive shop owners, the tourist officers have sent back their people from where they had come. But for this migrant labor part, as I said, it was more of a panic situation by I think the way it was being portrayed on the media channels and everything. It could have been handled much better. People did not need to move away. See, as you said earlier, that we had enough food. It's just that it could not reach out to people. So just a little bit of mismanagement there.
Maybe there's something to learn there, I think. So I'm just anticipating
some scope of improvement.
Yeah, just imagine if tomorrow we go for a war with China and we will all be grounded. Imagine we need those logistics systems to be up and running so that essentials don't stop to reach across India. You just don't know which part will be impacted so much. So, yeah, that's my view.
So Neil, this time I'm going to take an extra effort, write into the CEOs of all the huge logistic companies. I'm going to suggest them to form a single platform, have a single, like a consolidated or temporary organization where everyone can pool in their experiences, their ideas, their staff, their system as in their software management, and we can deal with a better situation of stay at home.
That's actually a good initiative. I think there's something that can be done there. So there's one question which came, which says these small time distributors, who operate in villages and etc. What measures they have to take, and how will their cost of operations go up?
So I think most of the things have opened up now across India, and the manufacturing units are up, and since they are manufacturing, the production is on, they have to sell their products to somebody. So they are going to reach out to these distributors, and one thing that I suggested to even the small time stores, grocery stores in each area was because the reach was limited, the time was limited to develop a proper infrastructure for delivering. I encourage that people themselves get into the delivery system. Each one, each distributor, each retailer, wholesaler gets into the distribution chain by himself and crosses the mile to reach out to people and to promote his own business. This is one way how we can deal with it, even, and if it is from the smaller areas, it is all the more better because you know how far you can reach out and you may be knowing your area very well. So that is one way how these distributors can improvise on business, grow business.
So before I move on to my quick 5 questions to you, this one question which came to my mind is this whole thing that the package delivery needs to be sanitized, and there has to be these guidelines to be adhered while delivering. So for example, I got a delivery yesterday which came in a separate, complete sealed plastic bag, and the person just left it down and he said, "Sir, you pick it up from here, I'm not going to touch it." So that was one of the logistics company had developed that system, saying this is how it's going to be. I'm going to take about 7 days to deliver your essentials, but it's going to be sealed in a plastic bag. He's going to leave it down and you're going to pick it up from there and go. No cash delivery, nothing. So what exactly you had to face as challenges, and what all you are doing while you're delivering goods to, people in Andaman? So all these small basics, because this is cost of operation. Your operation costs have gone up if you do whatever next.
Neil, it is better to be cautious and practice precaution even if it costs you a little bit. because what we are looking at here is to control the spread of the infection, and any step towards the control of the spread is like an investment. It is not an expenditure. Let's understand that is very essential, because when I'm delivering to you, I have to win your trust. As you had posed me the question earlier, I have to win the trust of my staff and my customers at the same time, and that is possible only when I go the extra mile to follow the protocols, to follow the SOPs, which are essential, and also to set an example. Everybody needs to take care of these kind of things. Everybody needs to be cautious. Unless we all come together and work towards the precautions, it's not going to be like I take precautions, you don't take precautions. Like, see the way it is spreading, see the way the numbers are going up. Somewhere there is a leak. Somewhere the precautions are not being followed properly, because if we were in a lockdown for such a long time, and after the lockdown still the numbers are going up so high, that means there has been somewhere the SOPs have not been followed properly. And after the lockdown, if I was out of business for such a long time and I want the continuity of my business, I will have to follow the precautions.
So participants, if they have any questions, please raise your hands or cite it in the chat, drop it in the chat box. We'll ask Sabiha. In the meantime, I'll make it a little bit more fun now. So I'll ask her 5 questions which are more funnier and more serious discussion now. We make it a little bit lighter before she gets very upset. I'm asking her very serious questions. So yeah, Sabiha.
No, I'm not at all upset. Neil, I'm sounding that way to you. Now I'm just getting very passionate about my work.
No, but okay, we'll leave that for the ending words. So my first question is, one unique thing you did during this lockdown, which your family will say, well, we never expected her to do this.
Yeah, delivering to the quarantine homes.
No, India never faced such situation.
No, my family never expected that, So yes, delivering to the quarantine homes, and I went across the whole of South Andaman feeding animals, stray animals. So that my family knows I like doing. And not only this, these are very interesting things. So I encouraged my mom to feed the hungry crows in Bombay. So this was over a call. And I encouraged her, like, Mummy, you see, they're all hungry. You need to feed. And she's also got on with this whole thing, like, of feeding crows. So that is one fun thing I did in the lockdown.
Okay, very interesting. Just for adding to whatever she said, in my discussion with her, she said she used to see a lot of cats and dogs who were walking and hungry, and she used to carry a lot of biscuits and milk in her car and get off and feed them. So her trip used to be longer. So one part of her was delivering essentials, one part was delivering food to all the animals on the road. It was her duty every day. So this is what I was very impressed when I was talking to her, saying that's thought process, that how do you know this is required. So yeah. Anyway, people, please drop in your questions if you have any. Second, one event in your life which you believe that changed you as a person forever.
The decision of doing my PhD is what changed me as a person. That moment when I decided was a life-changing moment for me, because not only when I went on to do my research work, there was so much that I learned about the place where I am, and that is when my journey in the logistics sector started. And since then, it has been a completely life-changing. Like, every moment has been life-changing after that. So that was one event that I clearly remember that, okay, this was very randomly. Someone said that, oh, you've done your master's, you should go on to do your PhD, and the moment I decided it, yes, it changed the whole thing in my life.
Your PhD is from Mumbai University is what I'm assuming.
Yes, it is. Mumbai University, Hinduja College.
Okay, and how many years did you take? 6 years?
Oh, no. No, it took me 3 years.
Oh, that's
3.5 years.
It's quite fast. Normally people take about 5 to 6 years on an average is what I've seen.
So no, it took me 3.5 years.
Very impressive.
Thank you.
One book you recommend that we all participants should read?
My thesis.
You'll have to share your thesis then.
I will share it with you, definitely. What better? I've put in so much of hard work, so you should read my thesis.
Okay.
See,
So
I'm making it more lighter and funnier, Neil.
okay, anybody who wants to read our thesis, please drop in your email. I will email it to you once I receive from
Nobody, I'm sure nobody wants to read thesis.
Why? I am going to enroll for my PhD. I don't think so. I am due filing my PhD. Sorry, the topic for which I should be selected by Bajaj. I hope Bajaj selects me. That's
Okay.
a different thing.
It will. Good luck to you.
Thank you so much. One advice you will give or have given as a mentor.
Believe in yourself and never give up. No matter how scared you feel, no matter how anxious you are, no matter how much anything tries to bring you down, the more it tries to bring you down, the more you have to decide to go ahead. And the second is, whatever people tell you, whatever they say behind your back is behind your back. It simply says that you're ahead of them. So these two things I have followed like anything in my life. No matter what people said behind my back, I never bothered to stop and care about it. I just kept walking. I knew I'm much ahead. That's the reason they are behind my back.
Interesting. Was it a very challenging road when you said you want to do all this, knowing, we all come from a very conservative background. So was it initially challenging to convince your parents that you want to do this in Andaman, you want to go there and set up?
Honestly, Neil, I don't believe, I have never tried to convince anyone. I have just decided to go on, do what I want to, and I let my work do the speaking. See, that's very essential, no matter how much you try to convince somebody, you cannot make them believe in your ideas unless you put them to practice and show them the results. So only when people see you working and they see the results of your work, they are automatically convinced. I think that's a more better way of doing things.
I agree. That's a very different approach. Okay, this is something very personal, but as a successful person, what's your daily routine?
Okay, I don't know if I'm a successful person or no. I think there are a lot of milestones we each have to achieve as we keep going along. Success is not like a one-time moment or something. You just have to keep walking. And milestones just keep coming. You have to keep achieving. That is one thing that we need to believe and understand. And as a person, I wake up early in the morning. I love more of daytime. It's like a dopamine dose for me. I have my tea and then I go on to feed the stray dog that I've adopted and my cats, and I attend to all of them. I look out for the robin bird because I've set up a house. I've set up a nest basically for the robin bird. And then I quickly go through what all I need to do during the day. I get things ready for my son because since I'm going to be away for the day, then whatever he needs, I just get all those things ready. And I leave, I reach office, I see the work at office, and that's how the day keeps continuing. I end my day, I go back home, I sit and talk to my son, go on my phone and try to be engaged somewhere on the internet, and that's it.
Okay. So, do you,
but I have few things that I think people need to follow. I'm sorry to interrupt that.
No, please go ahead.
One is fitness. Fitness is very essential. I strongly believe in fitness.
Okay. So, what's your fitness regime? I mean, what do you work out?
So before the lockdown, I was into cardio and strength training, and I think it brings a lot more balance to your life. It teaches you a lot more control, a lot more concentration to do all these fitness regimes. So fitness was a part of my day earlier before the lockdown. Yeah.
Okay.
Routines have changed, Neil. I think I've forgotten what it was like before March. I don't know. It's like suddenly post March, the whole way of living has changed. So that has now become routine. Some things have gone, some things have come. So it's different.
Well, you have not come to Bombay, and you will say this is not the Bombay I grew up in. So I'm sure routines have completely changed. Bombay has emptier
No
roads.
matter what happens, it's the air of Bombay is all that you need to get into your lungs, whether it is crowded, traffic jam, or whether it is without traffic. It's just that air that needs to come into you, and you get the dopamine rush.
Okay. I'm sure people from Mandavan won't agree with this one. They'll say.
So it's okay.
Okay, one brand you think that surprised you during this lockdown? Now that you are from the logistics space, you should tell me this.
Now that's going to be a very biased answer, Neil. I'm again going to skip that question.
It can be anything.
For
It can be an HUL brand also. You can tell me HUL surprised me, but that is okay. I'm not saying you have to tell me logistics, but I'm going to say you tell me one brand that surprised you. So I'll give you a small heads up. When I asked this question to someone else, I was told DMart, or I was told Reliance Industries. That one person who was from stock market, he said he was very surprised with Reliance Industries because a company in downward moment is suddenly sold so many stakes and become debt free. So he said, I'm very surprised with Mr. Ambani. So like that, what is one brand that surprised you during the lockdown?
I think Facebook, who went on to buy the stake at Reliance Jio platform.
I'm editing this part.
So yeah, exactly. Like obviously, so the one brand that really surprised me was Amazon. The way it was creating opportunities for people. Honestly speaking, the way it was going across globally, and you had like almost 50,000 to 1 lakh jobs created by Amazon during the lockdown. So it's a different thing to be a businessman and to sell a stake to a different company, but to create jobs for the needy people is a different thing altogether. So it was Amazon, definitely.
So one last question, and then I'm sure you can have your closing words. One action you did which kept your employees' morale very high.
Being at my office along with them when I tell them that okay, office has to begin at this time, and I am there with them to be a part of the operations every morning is really what boosts their morale. So it's not that I'm just executing orders. I am a part of the team, irrespectively, and every part of operations when I'm training new people, when I am hiring new people, I ask them if they are comfortable with handling any part of the operations, because when I started, this started as a off-season business for me, but went on to be the most engaging thing of my life. And I had very little people, I had very little capital when I started this work. So there was everything that need to be done in the operations I learned myself. Another reason to learn is because when you learn, you know how you can troubleshoot and how you can teach others to do the work in an easier way. So because this kind of work never existed in the location where I started it, I had to choose people and train them accordingly. I couldn't get experienced people because this never existed before me in this island. So I had to train myself, learn everything. And also, this is a very good way of boosting the morale because people know what you're talking about. They don't go on to say that, oh, she doesn't even know what she's talking about. How will we do this? Yes, this can be done. It can be done better. And this is the way of doing it. If I can do it, so can you. I think that is the best way to boost people's morale.
Okay. There's one quick question from Jasmine. We can ask her to unmute and ask this question. Jasmine, if you can unmute and ask.
Hi.
Hi, Jasmine. Good evening. How are you doing?
Good evening. I'm good. Thank you for a lovely session. I just have a quick question. So
Yes,
what
Jasmine.
keeps you motivated every day, especially during lockdown, to keep doing what you're doing? I mean, it's quite inspirational.
Um, that was a very nice question, Jasmine. And the satisfaction that I'm able to give these people who are cooperating in staying at home, the appreciation that comes in, that smile, that thank you, you've helped us, is the biggest motivation that I have during the lockdown.
Yeah, I'm sure. The joy on everyone's face.
Yeah, it's really motivating when you're able to solve other people's problems.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So before we conclude, one aspect remains is leadership, which we have not really touched and deep dive. So any leadership traits that you think any budding entrepreneur should have when they start their business and eventually grow?
Any work, when an entrepreneur decides to do, any kind of work, the first thing is that you have to understand it's a baby. It is going to cry in the middle of the night and you will have to wake up. You may not be able to sleep. You may have to miss your meals. You may have to miss your comfort. Everything to let it grow and stand on its feet before the time comes and start walking by itself. If you treat it that way, if you give it your love, affection, your own time, everything, it is definitely going to grow.
Good. I think this has been a very interesting, inspirational session. Any closing words from you before I say thank you so much? So, any closing words from you?
Yeah. So to all the women who have attended this session, to all the women who will be seeing this online later on, I just want you to let you know that it is okay to do things differently. It is not necessary that we fit into the preconceived notions, ideas, and boxes created by the society. To do things differently, apart from the routine set by others and defined by others, needs a lot of courage. And the moment you decide to do it differently, understand that you are brave. Don't wait for appreciation. Don't wait for approval. Even if that doesn't come through, you just need to acknowledge what you want to do. Your acknowledgement, your belief is more important than anything else. If you cannot acknowledge yourself, your belief, nobody will. Keep the grit and perseverance on, and just keep moving ahead. I hope I can inspire some people.
I think I am inspired. No matter, I am not a woman. Thank you, Sabia, for agreeing to do this with us. I know it was a little short notice, but thank you so much for joining with us and sharing your journey and get up close and personal with us. Very not normal regular for any person to be so open and candid about the whole system and what they face. So thank you, and we wish you the best for your future.
First of all, thank you for having me here. And as I said, you have done a fantastic job of reaching across so far away in the most isolated part of India. We are in quarantine, we are in isolation permanently. We are in some part which is completely in isolation. As a matter of fact, so for you to take effort and to reach out to a small time, an SME entrepreneur like me to come on your show and to talk is fantastic. It is great. It's a very empathetic approach to the whole thing. And I think it's really very nice and kind of you to have me here.
I think
and I'm not even a professional speaker. Thanks, Ratan.
Thank you so much, Sabia. And I wish you the best, and I hope to see you and meet you in person soon once the lockdown is over. So thank you so much. My regards, and hope to see you soon.